And we're up and running. So welcome to the Greyhound Star second Zoom call. I think everybody will be familiar to anybody watching the website or looking at the website. Trainers representative Peter Harnden, the man Mitch, David Mitchell, and of course Mark Keatley, probably the best known of all of you due to his tremendous success. Or to be fair, it's his missus' success, but you know we'll make do. And of course,
can you make that a bit more clear, Floyd?
And of course, we're looking forward to a little race on Thursday night. So I guess that's probably the ideal place to start. And I think I'll throw it open to the other two, other than to say, I think I did catch you out a little bit with this, Mark, because you agreed to do this before I told you who else was going to be on here. So, which was a bit of a schoolboy error, really, on your part, but they're here now. So, gentlemen, are you going to tell us how you're going to beat Mrs. Keatley in the St Leger final?
I'll let Peter go first. See what he thinks of it.
Well, it's quite easy. I'm going to go and let the tyres down.
That won't be a first we've withdrawn one in the final, would it?
I know they've got a few motors, so I'll let all of them down. I'm easy, I don't mind. It's going to be tough, isn't it? I mean, end of the day, Christoph's a superstar. He really is. I think people have already... I was one of the ones what actually thought the 3 steps was a bit false form, and I had to eat a bit of humble pie, really, when it came down to Nottingham, because the thing is, nothing being your own backyard, you sort of like, you understand form a bit better, or you like form better around your own backyard, and when something does it in your own backyard, and it really is a wake-up call, and it was the dog's a machine. I'm not very happy with my big Mark, because it's for some reason Mr. Mark keeps finding these dogs, and my man thinks he's this and that, and he never finds any like these.
Dave?
I mean, well,
go on, sorry.
Oh, it's all right. I think you've covered a lot of it there, Pete. We all kind of know how good Christoph is. It's going to be a hard task. The other dogs in the race, I don't really like talking about dogs that aren't my dogs, if you know what I mean. I know people like to mention other dogs and, it's put other dogs down, but I think every dog in the race has a chance. These big finals, we've seen, Christoph, obviously, Blue Tick George got the better of Christoph in the final at Nottingham. Obviously, there's excuses and he got a little bit behind. But I do think, for George to actually compete with Christoph, I think we need to get off the front. We need Christoph to get a bit of trouble in behind and then try and freewheel home. I think George is probably stretched for the last 20 or 30 metres, but it's going to be a tough task, isn't it?
It certainly looks that way. And of course, we've been entirely dismissive of the kennels and say the kennel's other runner, which is a bit rude. But switching to the form here, hopefully you can all see it. In terms of Ballydall B, she's there entirely on merit, and I'm sure she'll put up a performance, Mark.
Yeah, I think Dave hit upon a point there where, in fairness, even though the betting suggests that it's lopsided, Floyd, I'm not particularly, and I'm not deliberately avoiding my dog's chances, either or our main hope, i.e. Christoph, according to the form. I think Dave's perfectly right that it's a final whereby, given the circumstances of what may happen rather than what we're expecting to happen, does bring each and every ground into the equation. Listen, I'd be foolish to say, and I'd be lying if I said that if I thought Christoph went around the outside of the early pace types unscathed, would I be disappointed if he got beat? Of course I would. I think he's more than proved already in the very few races he's had that he's devastating from off the second bend to at least 800 yards. But what we get in that final, Floyd, is we get a dog that's already proved himself, given the right draw, and that's the Blue Tick George fella, that he can compete at a high level at up to 600 yards and even further, i.e. in the Derby and in the 680 competition that followed suit after he was eliminated from the Derby. And I'd also be lying in saying if going into this final, would I prefer to be a front runner? Of course I would. But would I prefer to swap dogs? I probably wouldn't, because I know what I've got, and like Dave says, I actually don't know what Jim Daly's got. Jim Daly may have something left in the locker. I hope not. I hope what we see is what we've got to contend with. And you know, and then you move on to the likes of John Mullins's dog. That, admittedly, I think out the inside 4 runners, she will find it most difficult, in fairness to her, if she doesn't lead. That's not saying that she'll throw the towel in. I'm just saying that in the concept of this race, should Smallmead not lead, I wouldn't be expecting her to win, in fairness. Should she lead, she's then going to have protection. You know, if she happens to cheat Blue Tick George up the inside and they go around maybe 2-1-3, 2-1-4, therein lies his chance with protection to escape and try and create an unassailable lead. Moving on to Ballydoyle B, our other runner, I honestly don't think she's any forlorn hope. Even though she's reached Category 1 finals for us, I actually don't think we've ever had her as good as we've had her now. I spoke to you personally away from this Zoom call, Floyd, and said that we just didn't think she was firing when she came to us from Graham Holland. She came across looking great, and I actually believe that she deteriorated. She just went off in herself. Her coat went a little bit. Her mind sent a little bit. Brought it to my attention, in fairness, over a meal one night when she said, I think we should start doing things differently with her, i.e. doing more work with her when it gets dark. And she said, you just, the times that we take her for a walk, there's very little interest there, but the times we do a little bit of something when it's coming down, when dark's coming at 6 o'clock, she shows a lot more interest. And we are actually giving her more freedom from that time of day. And people would laugh at that, Floyd. But, you know, you've been in the game long enough. Pete understands, and sure Dave does, that, you know, human beings, if they were given, should we say, cheese sandwiches every day of their life, you soon get demoralised, wouldn't you, come Friday, no matter what time you got it. Albeit that we've not had to change her diet too much. The things that she enjoys doing seems to be during the latter part of the evening. And I believe she's mentally thriving through it. And because her mind's good, her body's now good. And it wouldn't at all surprise me should the boxes open on Thursday night and she comes out 2 in front. I firmly believe that. I'm not making that statement in hope. I'm making it in fact that it wouldn't at all surprise me should the lids open and she's there 2 in front, because I firmly believe for the first time while we've had her, she's absolutely got a perfect trap draw. And then we move on to Peter's dog. Again, I think Peter's dog's perfectly housed, absolutely perfectly housed. I wouldn't have expected her to get anything other than maybe beaten for early from 1 dogs coming across her. She maybe wouldn't even be able to trap as good as she probably could from the middle of the handicap. Again, if you put a gun to my head and ask me what might show in front at lid rise, I'd actually say 3 or 4. Having said that, if they don't break a length and a half or 2 in front, I think Blue Tick George will rinse them into the corner, Floyd. I think he will have far, far too much for them, and he'll probably go round in front and set sail for home. Therein probably lies my chance then with the 5 dogs. I'm not saying Ballydoyle B or Peter's Bitch will be beaten then, but I think the chances diminish somewhat, to be honest. If either or either don't go around in front. I fully accept that both of them have shown tenacity in their runs round Perry Bar, but what I would say in the context of this final, the way all the dogs will be prepared for that race, I think 3 and 4 will need to be in front pretty quick to be able to hold their position in the middle part of the race, you know?
Yeah, and then of course you've still got Mark's Bitch on.
Absolutely, and I was going to go on to say there, I actually think the better we run, i.e. from Christoph's point of view, the better Mark Wallace's charge has. That sounds crazy, doesn't it? But I think the quicker we actually get into a good position, unless of course Mark's Bitch does take a quicker way and get across us and cause us interference in running to the corner. I think the better we run, the better I Am's a Royal will run. And of course, the quicker he gets to the front, the quicker I'll be probably looking back just to see where she is, because when all's said and done, he does look an absolute monster on the Rabbit. He does look one. She's already proved she is one, you know? Yeah. So she's done it. She's come from behind and She's grind it out times and times many. He's really not had to grind it out from anything other than off the second bend or third bend so far. And albeit that he went racing after Dave's dog in that final at Nottingham, he never really looked comfortable up the home straight, and he really made a real meal of bends 3 to 4. And albeit that he really flashed down the home straight and it looked like he was on top of Dave's dog pretty quick, he never was actually getting there, you know. So albeit that I'm not saying he's a chicken-hearted dog in any way, he's still got to learn how to mix it and be the bigger man from behind, which looks in the context of this race, which is what he might have to do. So I'm not afraid he'll have to come and win his race that way. I'm confident a little bit off the pace and do it. Not miles off the pace, because in this race as well, Floyd, unlike his previous 2 runs there, I think there's a lot more early pace in this race in abundance rather than the odd one, shall we say, that he's had to pass. Yeah. You know, he's been lucky so far. He's only had 1 or 2 dogs that have been better than him to the second corner. Here he might have 2, possibly 3, or even 4. Yes. So he's going to have to track cleverly. And the one thing I think he's still got on his mind is that the time that we entered him for the Derby and he got done on the bend, I still think he's got a small bit of that in there as well. I'm not saying he's a thinker. I'm not saying he's neshing it. I'm not saying he's looking after himself. But the time he broke in front and Kim Billingham's dog out-muscled him into the bend, I wasn't concerned about him getting done for early. I was more a little bit concerned that he lost ground round the bend. And he's such a good bend runner when he's in full flight, whereas his bend running at this moment in time, bear in mind he's only had a few races compared to some of these. I was just going to make that point. I think you're being quite harsh on him, because I mean he hasn't really learned how to run from the back, has he? No, he's not. But you know what I'm really getting at. I want to get to the end. He's like Peter said. You know, this supposed superlative superstar we've got on his hands here will only actually become that if he does learn how to do that, Floyd. Because you know these long runs to the bend. Actually, people thought that they would benefit him. I actually said to JK in an interview, the kamikaze starts that I've always been critical of, the Monmore starts, the Sheffield starts on the bend, are actually more beneficial to him, in my opinion, rather than having to mix it and muscle it with 500-metre dogs, which we have a lot of now in 6 bend opens, don't we? You know,
yes, we do.
You know, there's absolutely no way off a level break can I go to the corner with Blue Tick George. It's plain and simple. I'm not going to kid myself, you know. Yeah. And he's going to come up against that more and more, Floyd. Yeah. So in fairness, the kamikaze starts, albeit that, you know, he got a good break in that final where Dave's dog won. And he was taken off the track by what I perceive to be a poorly seeded ground. But we won't go into that. I don't want to dwell on that, but I do believe he only got beat that night through a poorly seeded greyhound, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
And, you know, the top and the bottom of the question you've asked me, Floyd, do I think I've got the best dog in this final? I do. Do I think it's a foregone conclusion? No, I don't. If he gets a clean run around the corner and gets within striking distance at the winning line, will he win? I think he will. That's basically
is your twos on shot? Is your twos on?
If you point a gun at my head and said, you're £5,000 there, Mark, you can have it on at 2s on, you can lay a 10,000 at 5, I'd lay a 10,000 at 5. It's the final of a St. Leger, Floyd.
Yeah. Fair enough. But as straight, I did sort of say to Dave, I said at one stage, you know, I like to talk to people who don't sit on the fence, and I've never known Mark sit on the fence in any time I've ever interviewed him. Just before we move on to something else, there is something, because it's totally relevant to this particular subject, and I realise we've kind of been hogging it a little bit with you.
Floyd, I want to ask Mark a question as well in a minute if you get a chance.
Yeah, of course. Well, I just wanted to ask him first of all, and it's a subject that I know that when we did an interview for the website, it was something that you kind of confessed, because you're quite a modest guy. You kind of confessed that you took great satisfaction in having discovered another exceptionally good dog. Whatever he goes on to achieve, we already know he's an exceptionally good dog in that sort of five to £10,000 bracket, which is your fishing area.
Yeah.
How'd you do it?
Look, it's no hidden secret that for years and years and years now, Floyd, I've had to get my living out of watching videos, whether it be this side of the water or the other side of the water. And you don't need me to tell you, I'm never looking for dogs that are already a Ferrari. You know, we're not in that fortunate position whereby I'm far from skint, Floyd. Should I say Haley's far from skint? She has all the readies. No, see, on a serious note, we're far from skint, but when you take into context that when we get dogs here at Roxholm, whether we own them outright or whether we bring our friends in, the normal brigade, you know, the Duncan Lambys and the Martin Greens, Paul Cardosi now and Darren Basswell, will go back a long time with. Irrelevant to the purchase price, we don't look for any kennel bills, Floyd. It's not what we're in it for. We're not in this to look for kennel bills. So basically, they arrive here, my decision that, yeah, you can be part of the syndicate, but there's no kennel bills. And then that way, they come here, they're my dogs as such, and we get to train them the Roxholm way, and we get to enter them and run them where we see fit rather than where we're going for a meal. You know, we run dogs to win, Floyd, you know, and we don't run dogs in a lot of one-off races because we're not looking for that type of greyhound. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with turning up. You know, let's not beat about the bush. Mark Wallace and Patrick Janssens, that even their competition dogs, they run them on a more regular basis than what we do, very, very successfully. That's the route they like to go. Both do it brilliantly. We don't look to go that route. When I look to go racing, I look to go racing in a competition format. And that's the way, you know, we have dogs here. But unfortunately, Floyd, as I've said to you, we don't generally get offered the 28.30 or 28.40 dogs that are winning unraced stakes or showing up well on a Saturday night in Shelburne or a Wednesday night in Shelburne. We have to try and go and find the ones that are maybe 4 or 5 lengths off that, with the potential of being lucky enough to spend quite a lot of time over there. There's not too many slow lads in Ireland, trust me, Floyd. But when you do find a lad that's maybe you might think not as good as the elite, and he's able to train a greyhound just 4 or 5 lengths off of what I'd say is top class running across the water, and you feel there might be a gap there or a bit of airspace that you can just improve it upon, that's where we've found our success. And luckily enough, on this instance, this fellow was bought out of an A2 in Limerick, Floyd. Don't get me wrong, the night he won his A2, he won in 28.50 odd. But the 3 runs prior to that were all full of promise. Not full of promise from boxers to halfway, but exceptional promise from the 3/4 mark. And it's something myself and Ailey's always enjoyed doing, is training a stayer, Floyd. You know, we've always left winning a derby. This sounds a bit blasé, I accept, and it's not meant to. We've always left winning a derby to Charlie Lister, to Jeffrey de Mulder, to Nicky Savre, and all them lads that know how to do that and have had dogs delivered to their premises that are able to go and do that. We've never gone farming those type of dogs. We've gone farming the dogs that have shown a lot of potential and can maybe go and win a Cat 1 over 6 pens. And if we're lucky enough to drop upon a dog like we was Higher Butt, then, you know, we'd obviously welcome them open arms. But he wasn't bought to run at Nottingham. It was the plan from the start that when he came over, it was always going to be the 3 steps that I thought, because there's a lot of 6 pen dogs that's always entered in that, he'd be able to hold his own early in 480 and 500 metre sections, and then he'd hopefully be the dog, as I said on an interview, that I'd bought. And if he didn't win that final at Sheffield, Floyd, he wasn't the dog that I clocked in Limerick. And thank God he was, you know.
Yeah, and say that 4 bend form was all a bonus. Mr. Harnden, you have a point.
Yeah, on that, Mark, I know I wondered whether you'd made a mistake going in the 3 steps and not going straight for the derby. Do you look back now? You're not a skint member, so the 10 grand what you got from the 3 steps wouldn't make a difference to your life.
No.
Do you think if you'd have actually planned and gone to Nottingham and get some trials, we could have actually this year seen history, and you could have had a run in the derby and nearly maybe got there or whatever, and then Ledger and TV Trophy all in 1 year from one dog?
You're completely right. You're completely right. Maybe if you'd not have damaged a toe in a trial at Toaster, and would have been able to run him, shall we say, in a heat and a final. You've been based at Nottingham for years, Peter, and we've introduced a lot of our good dogs in those 500 metre maiden heat and finals, you know?
Yeah.
And there've been shortages of them, haven't they? You know, there's been very few and far between. And
Yeah.
when he damaged a toe when he done his real good run over 500 metres in Toaster, he damaged a toe. And it was probably at that stage that the direction changed a little bit. He honestly wasn't bought for a derby, Peter, but the day he ran at Toaster, I said to Hayley, we might have to change tact here. That is an unbelievable trial that didn't look short of early. It definitely wasn't short of middle, and he came on like an express train. we may change tack. When the toe came as it was, Peter, I said to Haley, and the work he'd done after that, I said to Haley, I actually think this dog's just going to turn out a relentless runner. And because I'm very much, and always have been, Pete, under the understanding that it's very, very, as big as Nottingham is, and you'll correct me if you think I'm wrong, I've always had Sheffield down as a front runner's track, Pete. I have, honestly. Nottingham always down as a front runner's track. I have, honestly. If you've got dogs able...
It depends if you've got an A1 dog and an A6.
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah, maybe so. Yeah, but I have, even when we've contemplated last year and the year before, looking to challenge to try and win a derby. I'd always look for a front runner a good strong front runner, Peter.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I knew this lad from his homework and the trial after we'd had at Toaster that he just was lacking a yard, and even when I bought him. The fella that I bought him off said to me, would you not leave him for the Con and Anne? I said, he's not quick enough. I said, Mark, he's an absolute machine. I said, he's not quick enough. He'll either, this sounds bad on camera, I hope it's not, and it's not meant to. He was either going to break a leg or to be made to look foolish, Peter.
Yeah.
He just wasn't going to get that run from winning line to second bend, that he was going to be able to, should we say, be a challenge to a 28, 30 or 40 dog, Peter. He wasn't. And I even still maintain that now. Even if we'd have got through that first round that night, Pete, I'm still not completely convinced without, and I know you need a lot of luck to win a derby, of course you do. Dear Jet Sydney's case in point. He's gone on to be a great, great derby winner that could have easily gone out in the first round when he had a crash at the start. You have to ride your luck. I think we'd have had to ride a tremendous amount of luck, Pete, to win a derby. That's not to say we won't turn up next year if we're lucky enough. But
and if you'd have won the derby, and then say if you'd gone on won the Ledger, would you then have considered the TV trophy?
I think I'd have had to, Peter. It would have forced my hand. Nobody's looking for photos on the front of the racing post, Pete. We're all looking for that dog that's able to do what you're saying, aren't we?
Yeah.
And in our house,
and it's not about money when it comes to that.
No, you know me. Out of us four here, I spoke to Floyd a lot. Spoke to Dave for the first time this evening. You know me better than most.
Yeah, I know you from the Chesterfield days.
Exactly. When we had to win. When we had to. It's about the dog, and nobody understands, do they, that we all go in them kennels at night with Kiss and Pete. We love them. They're like, I call my little daughter Pippa, and she's my little granddaughter. When I go down there, I call him Hayes, and he's the same thing. Apart from one's an animal, one's a human being. There's no difference,
No.
And when you're feeding them, you feed your little kids, don't you, when they're born? To start with, the best of soft food, and then the best of hard food. You're only doing the same down there, aren't you? You rear a pup, and you feed them the best you possibly can. And from day one of being involved in this sport, from being a skint member to being slightly better off now than what I am, the dogs have always come first. I remember, I'm sorry to keep talking on, you'd have realised, Floyd, when you got me on this, I am hard to stop when I get going. I'm sorry. I remember years gone by when we were at Roxholm Grange. We were in the kitchen one morning. We had a great string of dogs. And I got my friend holding my phone. I'd hold my phone on me here like this, talking to a pal of mine that I did the horses with. And I'm calling out to my mum and Ailey. And Ailey's calling out to me. And she's saying, who's getting the poached salmon? Who's getting that? Who's getting this? And my mum came through the kitchen door. And it's so funny. She said, Mark, these sausage sandwiches are getting cold. We're feeding the dogs poached salmon, and I'm getting a sausage sandwich. Do you know what I mean?
We can tell.
That's how it is with the doggy people, isn't it? That's probably how it is at Jim's. That's probably how it is at your place. But that's definitely how it is here,
Yeah.
And that's the route we've always gone down. And I know I've gone off at a tangent there, but what I'm really getting to say, Pete, is, Haley Keithley, Mark Keithley, and now we've instilled our way into Craig. It's all about the dog. And no matter what happens on Thursday night, and truly believe me, I want to win. I won't be at all the nicest person to be around. Not because I'm a bad loser if we lose, because if we do lose and he's give his running, there'll be no problem. If we lose and he don't appear to have given his running, I'll be saying, what have we done wrong? It's always like that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that.
David, I want to get you involved in the conversation because apart from anything else, we've got the Melbourne Cup coming up. I know you have a great interest in Australia. First of all, though, the thing that you're probably best known for is this social media involvement, and particularly a couple of things, really. For a start, you're taking on the Antis in the way that nobody else seems to be able to, or certainly have tried as hard as you do, which I think is fantastic, and I think gives a lot of people some encouragement. And of course, primarily you're really known for the or chevying along, forcing along a little bit like you did with me with this particular episode in terms of the trial sessions and getting the televised trial sessions.
Yeah.
What I would ask you, what is the next penalty kick for you in terms of the technology and where you see us going forward as an industry?
I think in terms of where we're at now, especially with the trials that have gone online now, and where we're at with people on social media and the lockdown especially, I can't see any reason why we shouldn't be putting everything together now, where we should have a one-stop piece of technology, whether it's an app that, you know, they use in Australia now called Watchdog, where you can search for a dog, you can see all its trials, you can see all its races, you can find out every piece of information. I know we've got the information spread out a little bit, but I don't see a reason why the data is there. We can't pull all that together now. I know there's a lot of people on social media. You've got like Josh Seeley putting videos out from Swindon. I think more tracks need to do that. I know Josh does a lot of that off his own bat, but I can't see any reason why other tracks don't do that. You know, you're not going to tell me that Swindon managed to get an Oaks sponsor just out of fresh air, and Star Sport to sponsor an Opens just out of fresh air. I guarantee you it's down to the stuff that Josh has been putting out. Now, if every track was doing that, they would be able to attract the sponsors like the Oaks have, the sponsor, obviously, Star Sports. Because if you're putting that content out on social media, there's that, you know, you'd want to sponsor that because you know that it's going out on social media, it's going out to the right people, you're getting that drive behind it. Present moment in time, there's no real initiative from anybody outside the sport to want to sponsor anything, because you can't do anything, you can't promote it. Whereas you've got somebody like Josh who's going out of his way to take pictures of the Oaks Trophy or dogs in front of the sponsor's sign and really gather a momentum behind that. There's no reason why other tracks can't do it. The tracks, in my opinion, need to be doing more now. Technology's there. Everybody's on Twitter. We're in lockdown. There's nothing we can do. Every track in the country needs to be doing more to attract these sponsors. Yeah,
definitely so. It's the one kind of issue that we have, and you know, we are a very fragmented industry in terms of, for take personalities or anything out, literally by the way everything's constructed. Looking at what the Greyhound board owns, I mean, I think Mark Bird is doing a tremendous job at what he's at the head of the board. He is heading a board that is far from perfect, and a lot of the stick that the board gets, in my view, isn't down to the people that are in it. It's down to the way the thing was set up in the first instance. You know, the board has virtually no power. It has virtually no money. It fiddles around with money, and ultimately, and it's maybe something to bring up with Peter in a little while. There is still an imbalance of power within the board, in that the board only exists because the promoters agreed that it should exist. I remember it being set up. I remember the discussions between John Curran and Lord Donoghue when they were trying to broker a deal, and it was kind of who blinks first. And the net result is the tracks have to make the data available, but it's the tracks that own the data. We've got SIS and ARC that own the rights to the media. They own the races.
Yeah. I mean, sorry, Floyd, just to interrupt you.
I was just say maybe that's the direction we need to be going in. You know, accumulating all this under one body.
Yeah, I mean, people will obviously look at my social media and they'll think, you know, I have a pop at everybody really at some point or another. You know, and I don't have a pop at people or organisations just out of dislike, you know, certain organisations within the industry. It's not about that. I want the best for the industry. I want the best for the sport. And I know a lot of it gets targeted at the GBGB and everybody tags in the Greyhound board. But there's only so much they can do because the board is controlled by the promoters, by the tracks, by these people. Mark Bird, I've had a lot of conversations with Mark Bird. I've been on a couple of interviews with Mark Bird. And I get on with Mark Bird brilliantly. And I'm fully behind the fact that he's behind the sport and he wants to see the sport flourish. I just think that the promoters, it's an easy target. The GBGB is an easy target. If anything, I would like to see the GBGB take back more control. I want them to take back the competitions, not just the derby. I want them to take back all the competitions, because the competitions belong to the sport. At the end of the day, the GBGB should be standing up for the owners, the trainers, and every other stakeholder. It shouldn't just be about the promoters.
Can I speak up just on this subject 1 minute, Flo? Because I'm very ignorant on this, Dave. I'm a dinosaur when it comes to social media, Dave. And honestly, for somebody that's involved as passionately as I am with this sport, Twitter and Facebook and all the other bits and pieces that go together at the forefront of social media, I'm very much a dinosaur. So I apologise for anything that I'm not got an understanding about. I just want to ask a question regarding the GBGB. We're saying that we've got no money, and we're saying that we're given very little money as well. Can I ask, why is that, Floyd? Why have we got very little money? What is the reason for that? Or Dave, whoever knows. And if that's the case, are we actually correctly positioned right in the country? We're in the most expensive area in the whole of Great Britain. And if we've got no money, why are we there?
Oh, in terms of
why are we in the City of London? Why are we in the City of London running our sport if we only can justify being, shall we say, sat in Birmingham or Manchester or Leeds or Sheffield, for argument's sake?
I think that's tradition.
I can answer that, Floyd.
Sorry, mate?
I can answer that. I can answer that straight away. We've only just moved offices from where there was to where they are now. And I did make that point exactly what Mark said. You know, the amount of money, what it costs to actually be in London compared to somewhere else. Why? But the amount of cost, what it was going to cost to actually make people redundant, get new staff because of your relocation, etc. It actually, the financial side of it didn't quite make sense, they said. I still disagree with it. I still don't think we should be a London based, but Mark does do a hell of a lot of work with the politicians, and you don't realise how much work you do have to do with politicians to make this sport still be okay to run. So,
what fit for purpose, Peter, or feasible? Fit for purpose or feasible, i.e., what help from politicians do we need to us to allow to hold our heads up high and say this sport is fit for purpose? What do we need, Peter? And I'm only asking through interest. I am ignorant to it, Peter. I'm sorry.
I think to this point in time now, with the bond scheme and how you'll know to see some of your dogs rehoming down at Seaside, etc. The rehoming scheme now and the welfare side of things, I think we've nearly cracked it. I really do think we've nearly cracked it. Now I think that's cracked. I don't think we do need the politicians quite like we did. And the only reason we need politicians now is for the funding. Now, I know for a fact I could produce more money into the sport quite easily compared to what we've got now, but can't do it with how the board and everything's set up at this point in time, because it doesn't work for you. So we've got to sort this board out. We've got to sort the board out to get more money into this sport.
You only say board, Peter? Have we got time to keep talking about this, Floyd? Yeah,
of course, yeah.
Right. You know, when you say board, Peter, what does that mean? I don't under. I'm not prepared to be dull here. But what do you mean?
We need to
sort the board out.
The strength of the promoters is too strong.
Are we talking about promoters, i.e., the people that own the tracks?
Yes.
Right. Okay.
There's too much strength for them for me on the board. I mean, when it was set up, there was 29 tracks. I think 29 or 28 tracks.
Right.
We've got now 19.
Right.
We've still got the same membership.
Right.
At 19 is what we had at 28. So for me, that tells you that's not correct.
No. So why do we need, shall we say?
And I'll tell you this now, Mark. I'll tell you this now. To try and get it changed, you have to have an agreement within the board.
Yeah.
Now, who is going to agree to put themselves out of control of the sport?
But with respect, I'm struggling to understand here that, you know, the FA.
Yeah.
How many chairmen of football clubs are on their board?
No, I've not got a clue.
Well, I'd say there's none.
Yeah.
Because surely it's got to be a conflict of interest. If somebody's running a track, he's on a board of governors, surely that's got to be a conflict of interest.
I wouldn't say one person being on the board would be a conflict of interest because you've got to have an input from all sides.
Yeah.
Like us as trainers, we've got one.
All right, and that
owners have got one.
Okay.
Maybe breeders should have one.
Yeah. And
then maybe promoters should have one.
Okay.
So
rather than the cumulative numbers, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So I think for me, I think one side has too much input into the sport.
Okay.
I agree with that.
I might be shot down. I might be shot down for that. I might be in trouble for that. But I'll tell it how it is.
Yeah, but we're speaking hypothetically. We're trying. If we're having a kick in the ball, let's kick the ball. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Christ, you're going to cry over that bit of spilt milk then.
David,
Sorry?
No, I was going to say David was going to add a view.
Sorry, David.
I completely agree with that. At the present moment in time, and I know that, apologies, by the way, I just had to jump and get a charger. I know Peter's touched on there about the balance of power within the board. There's so many stakeholders in this sport, and I just don't think they're represented enough on that board. And we talked about funding there. The funding comes from the BGRF. And that board is made up of the GBGB board with a couple of added people on that. But still, there is only one order. There's only one trainer. And without owners, without trainers, there is no sport. Without no kennel hands, there is no sport. There's so many stakeholders, and they just don't have enough representation on the board. Now, if you look through the board, it's full of promoters. I've obviously talked about the ARC's influence on the board and the amount of people they've grown. But it's just, there is not enough people on the board that for the wider sport, for all the stakeholders, for the owners, for everybody else, the kennel hand.
Are you suggesting for a better independent view then, Dave?
Well, if you look at the independents, there's an independent that's put on from a track. So how can that be an independent person?
That's what I'm saying. We haven't got enough independent mediating views rather than people actually involved at the blunt end, yeah?
Exactly, and that's it. So the independents that are currently on, and I mean, I don't want to name names. Anybody can go on Google and find them, but the independents, they're not independent owners, they're not independent trainers, they're not independent kennel hands, they're not the grassroots people, the people that have been put on and the work at the track. So they've been put. So you've got promoters putting independents on that work at the track. So
for them.
So how can it just needs, I think the board just needs a bit of an overhaul, and for every stakeholder to have some kind of representation.
Yeah.
So Dave, how do you get an overhaul? Because the people who decide are already on the board. So how do you do it?
You have to open up that process of, you need to like the open race committee, for instance. Who's on the open race committee? The financial committee? Who's on the financial committee? Who controls all these things? Who decides on what happens at certain points in the sport? Who's making these decisions? Is there an
Mark, shouldn't it? Surely Mark should be given free rein to make that decision of who. Surely it should be. Is he our chairman?
No, he's our MD.
Sorry.
I'm going to sort of argue a little bit here. Only to sort of be devil's advocate in some of these things. Yes, I think there definitely need to be some amendments to the board. I can't really say that's our biggest problem. I can't particularly look at too many decisions that the board have made and gone, that's what's keeping us skint. I think there's definitely a case for saying, if the board had more power, if Mark Bird had more power and didn't have to reach agreement with the promoters who dominate the board, he might be in a better position to take things forward on a more commercial basis with a little bit more clout. As things stand, and we've had this conversation, and I've got involved in various discussions with people, we are not Australia. We haven't been Australia since 1926. The tracks are owned by companies. The companies make money, and however way you look at it, if you go back to the very early days, the GRA owned the dogs, the kennels, the trainers, you name it, and they only agreed to let people come in because it saved them money. Now, ever since then, the setting up of the NGRC was set up by the promoters. The GBGB was only set up with the agreement of the promoters. ultimately, that isn't fundamentally the biggest problem we face, in my view. The problem that we face is that we're a declining industry in terms of people coming through the door, and we have always had too much product, we've had too many people contributing for the product. We're now losing. We're not a spectator sport anymore, not to any means or intent. God knows how many people you'd know better than me, Peter. You know, Nottingham, even before lockdown, how many people would you have had there for their Monday night meeting, which was their
Floyd. But why are we declining? Why haven't we get these footfall through? Because we haven't. The promoters haven't been doing the promoting side of things. They've had the money from the bookmakers via Bags or SIS and been able to sit back and rest on the laurels. They haven't looked for the leisure pound because they haven't needed it.
That's right. That goes back to the business of saying, give Mark Bird and his board more power to say to the promoters, this is how we're going to go forward. The reality is, we all know a lot of the promoters, and there's some good promoters. I have friends who are promoters, people who I really like and trust. But the reality is, a lot of them have basically said, you know what, if we can get 10 or 12 grand a Bags meeting or an SIS meeting, that will pretty much do us, because it's not our first concern is how we keep the industry going forward, because a lot of us are looking to bail out. There's quite a few of the promoters themselves looking at age-wise are thinking, well, if this sees me through for another 5 years, I then might sell on for housing or sell on for something else. But
that's my biggest argument, Floyd. You've got these people who sit on the board deciding the future of a sport, but don't see the futures for themselves in the sport.
Absolutely.
I can't disagree with that.
The thing is, Floyd, can I just jump in? The thing is, right, at this present moment in time, Mark, you're on this call, yeah? Do you realise that the only one competition that could in theory be held in any calendar year that is open for everybody for the GBGB is the Derby? For the Oaks is with Swindon. If the Oaks could lapse, the St Ledger could lapse, all these competitions could lapse. They're with the tracks, they're with the promoters. Yeah. Why aren't all these competitions given back to the GBGB for Mark Moisley, who's the commercial manager, to go out there and say, right, XYZ, your Carlins or whatever it is, you know, come and sponsor this and do this, and you can have this, and you can have it when you want, you can have it at this track, you can have it there. This present moment in time, if I came in with 50 grand and said, you know what, I'll sponsor the Oaks next year, well, you've got to sponsor it at Swindon and you've got to have it on here and then. You know, we're not looking after the top end of the sport. Any money that gets dished back in the sport, it goes into the graded stuff and the bag stuff. It doesn't go into the top end of the sport. There's no protection for the top end. So what happens is your breeders, your trainers, your owners, everybody just left thinking, why am I going to go and buy a £20,000 dog? Why am I going to continue breeding litters? Why am I going to continue training just to go to Henlow or Harlow or whatever at 8 in the morning to put dogs around the track when nobody's going to watch them or no one's got any interest? And I mean, I may be being hypercritical there, but the top end of the sport has just been totally and utterly forgotten about.
I agree. But what I'm saying, I'm not justifying what's going on. I'm saying to you, the reason for that is because the board is fundamentally structured incorrectly. It isn't structured for the best interests of greyhound racing, which I think we are all into. It's structured for what's the best interest of the racecourse promoters. Now, how you get that, do you go to the promoters and say, we'd actually like you to hand over a big lump of your power that you have to control it? But then if you do, you may have to take some orders from Mark Bird to say, oh, by the way, you've just lost your race, or you can only race on these days, or whichever direction we go. That ultimately, I agree with you, David, that ultimately is what the sport needs to take us forward. We need to have people looking at the best interests of the sport. But if you said to Mark Bird, how much power have you actually got in any of this? He hasn't got an enormous amount. He's got the power to persuade. He's got the power to sit in front of Peter and the rest of the board and go, this is what we need for the best interest of the board. But if any of the promoters, and I'm not going to name names, say, nah, don't think so, he hasn't got a chance.
Exactly. You're right. You're absolutely right. And if Mark Bird turned around tomorrow and said, you know, we're taking back these competitions, and if you don't give us the competitions, we'll withhold the licenses for track. Because, you know, let's get this right. Promoters are in the sport because they're making money out of the sport. They're not doing out of the good of, just because they like greyhound racing. They're doing it because they're making money. But if Mark Bird wants to drive the sport forward, he's going to go to the board, and the promoters will say, no, you're all right. We're happy. We'll just keep on putting our bag stuff on. We don't have to put a competition on. We don't have to do this. And how can that be right?
Yeah.
How can it be right?
Yeah.
There is actually, I feel a little bit where people keep blaming the bookmakers and saying the bookmakers ain't putting enough money in. If actually you looked at the top and bottom and what came into this sport, you would be surprised how much money the bookmakers are putting in. You would be shocked that there actually wasn't that much difference to Australia, the money what's actually coming in. The difference is there's a certain group, and I'm not saying that's the promoters, there's a certain group which are dealing with the money, and no end of it is being kept for themselves, dished out to the promoters who have theirs, and then we get the last drop, etc. There's a lot of money coming in this sport, and it's actually not being dished out to the people on the ground floor. So whereas everyone keeps saying about the bookmakers, if I was a bookmaker, I'd be very tempted to turn and go, I'll show you my figures. This is what we pay towards dog racing. Get your facts right. Sort out who's getting the money.
And when you use the word dished out, Peter, without putting words in your mouth, are you suggesting dished out means how much these tracks get for showing races, i.e. as a bags contract?
No, who gets supplied the money? Who dishes the money out? Who has the money in the first?
You know the money the bookmakers are giving. You're saying the promoters are handling it.
No. I never said the promoters are handling it.
Sorry.
Who do the bookmakers pay money to?
I'm a dinosaur, Peter. I don't know. I've never been interested.
Where do you watch your betting, or where do you bet?
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Right. So where do you get them pictures?
Yeah.
How much are they being charging for those pictures, etc., and who's paying for that? So the bookmakers are having to pay for pictures, having to pay all that.
Understand.
Then you've got the SIS, all your bags, then paying them to the promoters.
Yeah.
The money, what's being paid for them pictures,
yes,
compared to what's coming into sport, there'll be masses of money there. What the sport's not seeing.
I agree. And can I jump in? This is why people look at the Australia and look at what we've got here. Now, I've done all the maths on Australia and how they handle it. Australia, well, just the GRV, which is Victoria, and we see all the money going to prize money and whatnot. Australia, their governing body, the GRV, negotiate a deal with TAB, and they say to TAB, this is how much the sport is worth, X, Y, Z, and then TAB goes, we'll have your media, we'll have your betting, we'll have everything. There's $100 million every year. They pay for the lot. And TAB can then do whatever they want. If they want to stream it around the world, they want to charge this or whatever. But the governing body are given $100 million.
And we've got somebody going back to the likes of TAB, doing that, saying, right, we've got these pictures, we've got this, it's going to cost you that. But that's not us doing it. That's not us as a sport. That should be the GBGB doing it, but it's not. So we're not copping that money.
But as I said, we are not Australia, because ultimately you have four.
Yeah, but we could be, Floyd, just because we haven't got a toe. We still could be. If we controlled all our data and all our rights and everything, we would be as good as Australia.
Theoretically, but do you want to be the guy who says to SIS or ARC, oh, by the way, we're now taking control of that?
We can't. That's been given away.
This is my point. So I'm trying to be sort of practical from where we are. I think the point that you make, I don't think anybody would dispute. I think even the SIS would dispute that they made a great deal of money from greyhound racing when they were able to control everything. SIS is now a very different company to the one it was, because in the first instance, horse racing made them become a different company, and horse racing basically dumped them and said, we'll go do it ourselves. They then ultimately, SIS really became like a provider. We've now got a situation where we've got too much racing for what the bookmakers want, because ultimately we're not a spectator sport anymore. We are entirely dependent on the bookmakers for our income. And if the bookmakers close tomorrow, this industry would be gone in 3 months. That's the reality. So what we've got now, we've got this false situation at the moment that we've got twice as much racing as the bookmakers actually want. So it's still being spread around. In the end, though, and however way, and I've given this years of thought, however way you view it, in the end, it will get down to the value of the races and the value of the dogs. Because until you get to a point that you as a trainer can go to Nottingham or whichever track you're at and say, I demand this, and there isn't somebody else at another track or another trainer in your track going to go, I'll do it for half that, then you're never going to get it, because ultimately this isn't Australia. It's not a cooperative, it's a business. And if the bookmakers, through whoever, through SIS, through ART, or just directly themselves, want to say, I tell you what, we'll have whatever's cheapest. We only want X amount of races. We want this much coverage. It's good for us. Greyhound racing is good. It's got a very good return, much better return than horse racing in terms of percentages, what they actually take. Pound for pound, greyhound racing is way superior to horse racing. All the figures are there to show it. But ultimately, we only need X amount of it. And until greyhound racing is in a position that it can say, I tell you what, unless you pay more, you are not going to be getting those extra meetings that you're looking for. We're not going to get it, because at some stage it will stop. Because if the bookmakers paid it to the promoters themselves would keep it. They'd be going, hold on a minute, why do I need to pay Pete Harnden £200 to win an A1 when I can pay him 150 quid? Or somebody else that will train dogs at Nottingham and will take the 150 quid. That is where we will ultimately end up, and it will be simply down to supply and demand. My biggest concern, which is something we haven't gone into, is that the future of betting is clearly online. It's not the betting shops. The betting shops will continue to decline. There can't be any doubt. My biggest concern, and certainly where Mark Moisley I'd get involved, is to say, what are we doing as an industry to make greyhound racing sexy to the betting industry? We need to have a product that hasn't really changed. You look at a bloody betting slip. A betting slip is the same as it was when I was a kid. We look at our races, the way we present them going into Australia and what we do. What are we doing as an industry to say to the bookmakers, do you know what? You can't do without us. We have the best betting product, and we're going to present it to you in a way that you are going to want to promote as best you can, because we want a greater and greater turnover, which will ultimately bring more and more money into the industry. That's my biggest concern.
The thing is, you've also got to remember, Floyd, is that in Australia, the GRV, Sandown Park, the GRV decide Sandown Park's budget for the year and give Sandown Park their money for the year. Current problem you've got with the structure, the GBGB and the promoters are on the BGRF, the promoters are on the board, and the promoters are running the tracks and they're getting the money. So where does it stop, and where does it just, the promoters are involved at every step of the way? When do we take the promoters out of it and we say, well, actually, this is what comes in the sport, this is what the promoters have got, now promote, run your track. Why are they in the BGRF? They're on the GBGB. They've got their own tracks. Basically, they've got the hand in everything. They don't have that in Australia.
No, it doesn't. But as I said, I don't think it's...
You don't have that in any sport.
Yeah, I don't think it's directly a financial thing. I certainly think that there is too much promoter influence within the board. And I mean, we've got a situation at the moment, which is something I wanted to go on to talking. I mean, Peter's has been chasing for a long, long time to get a change in disqualification rules. Now, he will not possibly get that through, and I'll ask him in a second how that's going, but he will not possibly get that through without promoters' approval. That's the reality. Unless the promoters agree that there should be a change in the way disqualifications are carried out, it will not get through. But if the promoters want something, there is no reason that Peter's ever going to be consulted over it, or at least he'll be told it's a done deal. Now, that's the kind of thing, and that's the kind of thing you're relating to, David, to say in relation to open racing. We need the Oaks. We need to make sure there's a Derby and Oaks, a St. Leger next year. We need the board to do that. That's a power issue, and that's the bit that I think should be addressed, and I would love to see Mark Bird give more power. When it comes to the industry, you cannot make a promoter pay it if he doesn't want to. That's not feasible.
Well, the point I'm trying to make is the promoters have bosses. They have their own stakeholders, and they have to turn a profit. So for what reason are they going to be interested in Peter as a trainer, or Mark as a trainer, or me as an owner, all they've got to be interested in is their boss, their stakeholder, but they're involved in the BGRF, the GBGB, and they run the track. So when does we take the power away from them and we start spreading it around so every stakeholder gets a say? That's all I'm saying on that.
I agree. I just, as I said to you though, we came into this when GBGB was set up. I remember John Curran, and he was representing the promoters because he had an awful lot of influence with the promoters. Him going with Donahue, and there was remember this is a last chance saloon thing for greyhound racing. It was pure threats, and ultimately the only way that the board was set up was that the promoters were given the balance of power. And without that, they wouldn't have signed up. And we were faced at that stage a chance that we would have simply gone on to local authority control, which wouldn't possibly have been the worst thing because local authorities would have just left us to get on with it. There's only 18, 19 tracks. So
Floyd, can I just butt in? When we're talking about input, we've just had, it's a good scheme. I was, originally when it was put to me, I was a bit not really buying into it because it was too much money when it was first put to me. But the bond scheme, now we know the people who are making good money out of greyhound racing, etc. Who actually pays towards a bond scheme and who doesn't pay towards the bond scheme? That tells you where the balance of power is.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, the money needs to come in, and you either pay it directly.
What group does not pay towards the bond?
Well, the promoters don't pay directly, do they?
No. But owners do.
Yeah, but
trainers do.
It's all money fishing around the system, because if you are like one of the Ladbrokes Coral tracks, you'd say, well, actually, we pay bloody good prize money, so our owners can afford to pay to have their dog retired. So I think it's slightly misleading just to present it in that way. I really do.
So why are the GB putting some money in towards it?
Again, it's just another way that the money gets into it, isn't it? We can direct it. We can say to the tracks, okay, I tell you what, we will have the tracks. We will reduce your special license fee, because it's a special license fee that ultimately pays for the running of the offices and paying Mark Bird's wage and the stipendiary steward's wages. That's one aspect. You could also say that you divert the money a different way through the fund, but you're only calling it something else. It's a bit like the famous Walthamstow toilets, when Walthamstow took an absolute hammering for spending 28 grand of fund money or whatever, more than that, a huge amount of money on toilets. And I remember Chandler saying to me at the time, well, what we could have done is we could have not spent the money on the track, and we could have said that money is going in towards track improvements, and then we would have spent a different pot of money on the toilets. So it is money that's going to come in or out the system one way or another. How you label it can be a little bit, I don't know, devious if you choose it to be.
I think the problem is, though, Floyd, it's the fact that it seems like one group of people are making decisions and then we've all just got to live with it. I'll just go to a staying on this subject slightly. I had a massive issue with the Nottingham situation. I had a massive issue with the percentage of taking of prize money that went to rehoming and trainer. Now, I haven't got an issue with the actual principle of the matter to pay towards rehoming and pay towards a trainer, but prize money is prize money. You can't dictate where prize money. If you pay £500 out to a winner, you can't then take 150 back and say it's going to be handed here, it's going to be handed there. That is up to the person that wins the race, for where they decide to dish the money out. And I know they've changed that now, but it does go back to the balance of power. An owner and a trainer won't have came to that decision. It'll have been the person who runs the track or the promoters, you know.
Well, listen, I'm ended up being.
I can answer that, Floyd. Let me just jump in on that. Yeah. What originally, years gone by, probably 10 years or more away from there, when you'd go into a bookmaker shops and there'd be a couple of sheets up on the wall and there might have been one track paying so much prize money and then there'd be Nottingham paying so much prize money, and it didn't look like Nottingham was paying the prize money what the track next door was paying. But actually, behind the scenes, there were bonus payments for going to bags. There was this and that going for different things. So what happened then is to make it look like in that betting shop that the actual prize money at Notts was comparable to the others, which it was, but it was all behind the scenes. They lumped it all onto the prize money so that actually the standalone prize money looked good. and then the bonus money, etc., was taken off of it in the percentage. So actually, it was, you never got that money. It was always paid behind the scenes, but instead lumped it up front, so it looked there in black and white. That's how that actually happened.
To be honest, I actually beg to differ. I know what actually happened was the fund at the time, the BGRB. This is, I don't know, 15 years, 20 years, maybe 15 years ago. The fund or the board decided that of their prize money allocation, they would start to dish it out in terms of how much prize money was paid. So you ended up with a ridiculous situation that like the very small tracks, the Yarmouth, the Rye House, Henlow and whatever, were paid absolute peanuts. And the person who was the first to kind of do exactly what you said was Stephen Ray at Hall Green. And Stephen Ray said to the Hall Green trainers, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll scrap all your retainers. We'll scrap all your bits and pieces on top. We'll make it all prize money. And then when it goes to the board, we can say this is our prize money level, so we'll get a bigger grant. Now, the only going back to David, all I would say to David is this. And as I said, I'm not defending Nottingham. I'm not defending the promoters. I'm just trying to, we can all sit here and rant with the same agenda, and we don't kind of learn anything or take it any way forward. All I would say is this: when you entered the dog at Nottingham, it said in the calendar before you entered the dog, you're going to lose 17.5% or 17%, whatever it was, before you enter the dog. Now, if you were silly enough or couldn't work out that your 200 quid was going to get hacked into, kind of don't blame anybody else. Everybody knew what the circumstances were. You can argue that Nottingham did it that way by increasing the prize money to take it away again, where other tracks didn't pay that level of prize money and simply paid it in a different way. Someone like Yarmouth, as an example, put a lot of money into their own home finding scheme, paid a lot less prize money. But ultimately, we're all grown-ups, and you knew that before you played. You know, that would be my only point on it.
Which is fair enough, and I can't disagree with what you say, and I understand what Peter's saying. But my point of view as an owner, and you know, I've had graders, I've had decent dogs, obviously Boutique George. I just think the owners, and I can only speak as an owner, but obviously I see other stakeholders, kennel hands, and you know, and even trainers. They just get the raw deal every single time. I just look at every situation and I think, well, where do we think about the owners? Where do we think about the other stakeholders? When do they come into play? And I just think we get the raw deal.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree with all of that. I was really trying to put a different emphasis in terms of the finances, but I agree. And I think there could be a lot more done, and a lot, I don't know, a lot better thought through. Before we finish, because I've kept everybody on here for ages, a lot longer than I meant. Peter, just in terms of the DQs, I know you've put an awful lot of work in it. How close are we to getting an appeal system? Or can you say, are you able to talk about it? How do we stand?
As far as I'm concerned, it's all agreed. I did suddenly hear something the other day that it's got to be agreed by a certain group of people, which I thought, you know, they had got people on the committee. So if it's agreed on the committee, as far as I'm concerned, they'd agree. That's why they put these people on the committee. But it transpires it's not quite like that. So if it goes on another 5 years, I can guarantee you I shall put in for another tenure on being a board member, because I'm going to make sure it goes through come hell or high water.
Definitely so. Guys, listen, I need to call it to a halt. I don't want to abuse this. Yes, Mark, sorry.
Just one quick question. I wanted to, because it may be a question that's not even relevant to what we're talking about with regards to owners and prize money and dogs and competitions and so on and so forth. One thing I wanted to ask, and you lads may not know the answer to it, but moving on to that subject of, should we say, the top end of our sport, i.e., should we say the open racing, certain competitions this year, well, not certain, hell of a lot of competitions, major competitions have been held under the sponsorship of the RPG TV. Where does that money come from?
Bookmakers.
The bookmakers that sponsor the channel.
Right, I know they sponsor the channel. So basically, the funds that they produce, obviously, it's down to the people that's running RPG TV to ensure that the money they're getting in, the finances that are available, warrants bringing to the table sponsorship of a competition. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah. My understanding.
So one thing I want to ask then. Let's say they didn't, which they're not entitled to do, or shouldn't be expected to do. Where would all that money have gone?
Well, I think it kind of works the other way around. The way it was explained to me was this, that at the start of the year, RPG TV board or executive get together and say, this is how much it's going to cost us to run the channel for the year.
Yeah.
And we come up with a figure, and then there's an agreement between the sponsors of the program that they pay on a proportionate amount to their turnover. So although you might see 6 names up there, a couple of them are probably paying about 3% each. And a couple are probably paying 8%.
You've actually read into what I'm asking. I didn't want to speak it up and because I could quite easily because my blood boils when it gets to certain bookmakers that supposedly do and don't give into the sport.
Thing is, Mark, what you got to realise, you know, when on your Friday nights or on your Monday nights in Nottingham, when your opens are on, so when you talk the higher end of the sport, the turnover produced for your RPTV sponsors, your bookmakers, is massive compared to like your Wednesday night. So they want opens. They know opens produces them a high revenue. So if they have to put some money in to produce the opens, they will do. You know, it's not them saying, "Oh, well, you're good lads, you are. We'll give you some."
That's why
money.
I'm asking. That's why I'm getting at, Peter.
Yeah, they know them opens produce money.
Correct. Joe the fool in me is saying to me, you know, who actually does and who actually doesn't want the better racing. The bookmakers surely want it on certain, you know, that like you've only got to look at Betfair. Look at what bets you can get in a quarter final of a derby online or in a shop compared to an 11.06 at Nottingham this morning.
Yeah.
I want people to bet an 11.06 and get shown where the coffee machine is.
I'll guarantee you now, a Monday night or a Friday night, the best producing revenue for bookmakers on RPTV of all the shows in the week.
Absolutely, without a doubt. And that's why I'm asking Peter. That's the Floyd read into what I was getting at straight away, you know, with regards to who is and who isn't, you know, got a pair of balls inside the sack type of thing. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Very much so. Gentlemen, I've kicked the arse out of this now. I hope you will all come back. I've got a whole pile of people. Some have recently, in the last day, have agreed to come on, and there's so many people I really want to get on here. I'm loving doing it. Really,
the good lads. The good lads you've got on there tonight, Floyd, with them too. They're good lads.
Don't let that get out. Don't let that get out.
Well, I still owe you money or something.
Probably. You probably do owe me. Gentlemen, thanks very much. I'm about to finish the recording. Hopefully I'll see you about soon.
Okay.
Cheers. Cheers, Jeff.
Bye.